I need to tell you about Margaret Pritchard before the story gets away from me. Before I convince myself it didn't happen the way I remember it. Before the details blur into something I can live with. Margaret was 63 years old in 1975, a widow with sensible shoes and a government-issued clipboard. She'd worked for the Census Bureau for 11 years, without incident. She was the kind of person who showed up early, followed every protocol, and never complained about the mountain roads that turned her kidneys into maracas. The kind of person you could count on. After April 17, 1975, she never worked again. Not for the Census Bureau, not for anyone. I know this because I was her supervisor, and I'm the one who found her 3 days after she went up Cutter's Gap Road. I'm the one who saw what she'd written in that government ledger before they took it away. And I'm the one who's been carrying this around for almost 50 years, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. So here's what I know, what I saw, and what I've spent half a century trying to understand. The assignment was routine. Cutter's Gap Road, about 40 miles northwest of Asheville, up in the kind of Appalachian hollow where the mist doesn't burn off until noon and the roads are more like suggestions than actual paths. We knew there were families up there who'd never been counted properly. The 1970 census had been a mess in that area. 2 different enumerators reported conflicting information, and one just marked the whole region as inaccessible rather than deal with it. Margaret volunteered. That's important. She actually raised her hand when I mentioned Cutter's Gap at the monthly briefing. Said she'd grown up not far from there, knew how to talk to mountain people, knew not to ask too many questions about certain things. Looking back, I wonder if she knew something, if she'd heard stories. She left the district office at 6 a.m. on Thursday, April 17th. She had 73 houses on her list, starting with the Henley place at the base of the gap and working her way up. She was supposed to check in at noon and again at 5 p.m. We had a system worked out with the ranger station. They had a radio, could relay messages. The noon check-in came through fine. She'd completed 12 houses, everyone cooperative, no issues. Her voice was cheerful, professional. She said the weather was holding and she'd try to get through another 20 before calling it a day. The 5 p.m. check-in never came. Now, I want you to understand something about protocol. The Census Bureau in 1975 didn't mess around with safety, especially not in remote areas. We had strict check-in requirements. If an enumerator missed a scheduled contact, we had procedures. But those procedures assumed normal circumstances. Flat tires, getting lost, minor injuries. They didn't account for what happened to Margaret. When she didn't show up at the district office by 8 p.m., I called the ranger station. They sent someone up Cutter's Gap Road, but had to turn back. A spring storm had rolled in, the kind that turns dirt roads into chocolate rivers. They promised to try again at first light. I didn't sleep that night, kept thinking about Margaret's sensible shoes navigating those muddy slopes, kept wondering if she'd slipped, broken an ankle, was sitting somewhere cold and scared waiting for help. The rangers found her car at dawn on Friday, parked at the bottom of a long dirt driveway about 18 miles up Cutter's Gap Road. The driver's door was open. Her purse was on the seat, wallet intact. Her census materials were spread across the passenger side like she'd been organizing them. The keys were in the ignition, but Margaret wasn't there. They followed the driveway up through a stand of white pines and mountain laurel. A quarter-mile in, the trees opened up to reveal a house that shouldn't have existed. I say shouldn't have existed because I'd been over those census maps 100 times. I'd reviewed the 1970 data, the 1960 data, even pulled some records from 1950. There was no house marked at that location. The property ownership records showed a lumber company had bought the land in 1923 and never developed it. The parcel was listed as uninhabited forest. Yet there it stood. The house was old, not quaintly old, but wrong old. The kind of structure that makes you wonder how it's still standing. 2 stories, weathered grey wood that might have been white once, windows like empty eye sockets staring down the mountain. A porch wrapped around the front, sagging in the middle like a frown. The roof was mostly intact, but showed patches of sky through missing shingles. The rangers called my name as they approached. That's procedure. You identify yourself, make your presence known. They called out several times. No response. The front door was ajar. They found Margaret sitting at a kitchen table inside. She was alive, physically unharmed, not a scratch on her, but when they said her name, when they asked if she was okay, she didn't respond. Just sat there with her hands folded on the table, staring at the wall. Her census ledger was open in front of her. She'd filled out exactly one form. They brought her down the mountain, called me. I met them at the ranger station and saw her with my own eyes. Margaret Pritchard, who'd never missed a deadline or forgotten a protocol, sitting in a plastic chair with a cup of coffee going cold in her hands. She was looking through me, through the walls, through everything. "Margaret," I said, "what happened up there?" Her lips moved. I had to lean in close to hear. "I counted them," she whispered. "I counted all of them." That's all she said. For 3 days, that's all she said. Just that one sentence over and over. I counted them. I counted all of them. On the 4th day, she stopped talking entirely. They kept her at the county hospital for observation. No physical trauma, no signs of assault or injury. The doctors called it a severe dissociative episode, probably brought on by stress or a psychological break. They recommended psychiatric evaluation. I should have left it alone, should have filed the incident report, marked those houses as incomplete, moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about that census form, the one she'd filled out at that impossible house. The rangers had brought down her materials. Standard procedure, collect everything, document the scene. The ledger sat in my office for a week before I worked up the courage to actually read what she'd written. The form was meticulous. Margaret's handwriting, neat and precise as always, but the information she'd recorded made my skin crawl. Address, no street number, no route number, just Cutter's Gap Road, 18 miles. Head of household, Ezekiel Cutter. Age, 127, relationship status, widowed, number of persons in household, 23. That stopped me. 23 people in that ramshackle house? I kept reading. She'd listed every single occupant, names, ages, relationships, but the ages were wrong, impossible. Ezekiel Cutter, 127. Sarah Cutter, daughter, 89. Thomas Cutter, grandson, 71. Rebecca Cutter, great-granddaughter, 54. The family tree kept branching, kept going down generations, but all of them were living in that house. All of them impossibly old or exactly the ages they should have been if the oldest members really were born in the 1840s. At the bottom of the page, in the section marked Notes or Special Circumstances, Margaret had written one sentence in handwriting that got shakier as it went along. They're all still here. None of them have left since 1897. I stared at that date. 1897, 78 years before Margaret climbed those porch steps. Now here's where I should have done the rational thing, filed a report about Margaret's mental break, sent someone else up to properly enumerate that address, moved on with my life. But I'd known Margaret for over a decade. She wasn't prone to flights of fancy, she didn't crack under pressure. She was the most reliable person I'd ever worked with. And something about those names bothered me. I drove to the county records office that afternoon. Told the clerk I needed to see property records and death certificates for the Cutter's Gap area, going back as far as they had. She gave me a look. People don't usually request records from the 1800s, but she showed me where to search. It took 4 hours of digging through dusty ledgers and microfiche, but I found them. Ezekiel Cutter, born 1848, died 1897. Cause of death, influenza. Sarah Cutter, born 1886, died 1897. Cause of death, influenza. Thomas Cutter, born 1904, died. No death certificate. I kept searching. The pattern became clear. The Cutter family had lived in that hollow since at least 1820. They'd been relatively prosperous by mountain standards, owned a lumber mill, employed a dozen local men. But in September 1897, influenza tore through the household. 9 family members died in the span of 3 weeks. After that, the records got strange. Property taxes were paid regularly through 1915, then sporadically after that. But there were no more birth records, no death records, no marriage licenses. The family just stopped interacting with the outside world. The last official mention I could find was a 1923 note in the timber company's records. Cutter property remains inhabited. Family declined sale offers. I sat in that records room as the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and I realized Margaret had documented something that couldn't exist. A family that had stopped, frozen in time, living in a house that wasn't supposed to be there. I should have stopped investigating, should have recognized that some questions don't need answers. But I'd been a bureaucrat my whole life. I believed in documentation, in evidence, in the tangible world you could put in a ledger and file away. So I decided to go up there myself. I want to be clear about my mindset. I didn't believe in ghosts or hauntings or any kind of supernatural nonsense. I figured there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe Margaret had misread the ages, maybe she'd confused dates. Maybe the family was playing some kind of elaborate prank, claiming to be descendants with the same names as their ancestors. I told myself that all the way up Cutter's Gap Road. I made better time than Margaret had. The roads had dried out since the storm. I passed the 12 houses she'd completed that first day. Saw the Henley place, the Macomb cabin, the Johnson homestead. Normal mountain people living normal lives. At the 18-mile mark, I saw her car. It was still sitting there, driver's door still open. Nobody had thought to tow it. In the chaos of Margaret's breakdown and hospitalization, everyone had just forgotten about it. That should have been my first warning. Official vehicles don't get forgotten, but I was focused on the driveway that wound up into the pines. I parked behind Margaret's car and got out. The afternoon was warm, insects humming in the undergrowth, but I felt cold. The kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature, but from something else, something wrong. The driveway was overgrown but passable. As I walked, I noticed things, small details that accumulated into a sense of deep unease. The trees alongside the path were all dead on one side. The bark had fallen away, leaving pale grey wood exposed, but only on the side facing the house. The other side was green and healthy. There were no birds singing. I'd been hearing them all day as I drove, cardinals, thrushes, the usual mountain chorus. But here, nothing, and there were objects scattered in the underbrush. I stopped to examine a few. A child's leather shoe, rotted to almost nothing. A rusted hand mirror, a cracked porcelain doll missing its eyes. Things that might have been dropped or thrown from the house, left to decay. When I emerged from the trees and saw the house, my first thought was that it looked worse than the rangers had described. But then I realized it looked exactly as bad. I'd just been hoping they'd exaggerated. 2 stories of rotting wood. Windows dark with grime or maybe just darkness inside. The wraparound porch sagging dangerously. But someone maintained it, at least minimally. The roof was patched with mismatched shingles. The front steps had been reinforced with newer boards. Someone was keeping this place standing. I stood there for a long minute, wondering what Margaret had felt standing in this exact spot. Had she sensed what was coming, or had she walked up those steps with the same professional confidence she brought to every assignment? "Hello," I called out. "This is Jack Morrison from the Census Bureau. I'm following up on a visit from last week." My voice sounded small, absorbed by the air before it could echo. I waited. No response. The front door was closed now, but when I climbed the porch steps, testing each one carefully, I saw it wasn't latched, just resting in the frame. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave. Walk back down that driveway, get in my car, drive to the district office, and mark this address as refusing to participate. File my reports, forget about Margaret's ledger and those impossible ages. But I was the supervisor. I'd sent Margaret up here. If something had happened to her, something real and explainable, I needed to understand it. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not rot or decay like you'd expect from an old house. Something else. Something organic but wrong. Like flowers that had been preserved too long, their sweetness turning cloying and sick. The interior was dark. What little light came through the grimy windows showed a front room that might have been nice once. A fireplace, built-in shelves, a worn but intact rug. And people. I counted them before I could stop myself. They were sitting in chairs arranged around the room. Some on a sofa that had lost its stuffing in places, some in straight-backed wooden chairs, some on the floor, backs against the wall. All of them were looking at me. "Mr. Morrison," one of them said. An old man, ancient really, sitting in a rocking chair near the fireplace. "We wondered if you'd come." My mouth was dry. You know my name." Mrs. Pritchard was very thorough in her documentation. She explained who she was, who she worked for, who might follow up. He smiled. His teeth were yellow but intact, too many of them visible in that grin. "You're very dedicated to your work." I should have run. Every fiber of my being wanted to bolt out that door and never look back. But I'd been trained to be calm in unusual situations, to follow protocol even when things got uncomfortable. "I'm here to complete the census enumeration for this household," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "May I ask who you are?" "I'm Ezekiel Cutter. This is my family." He gestured to the others in the room. "You're welcome to count us. That's what you do, isn't it? Count people." I looked at the faces watching me. Men, women, children. Some looked impossibly old, skin like parchment stretched over bone. Others looked younger, but with something off about them. Eyes too bright, skin too smooth, movements too still. "How many of you are there?" I asked. "The same number Mrs. Pritchard recorded, 23. We haven't changed." "Mr. Cutter, I need to verify some information. The Census Bureau has you listed as—" I stopped myself. How do you ask someone if they're really 127 years old? "As dead." Ezekiel smiled again. "I'm sure your records are very thorough. We died in 1897. Most of us, anyway. The influenza came through like fire that year. Took 9 of us in 3 weeks. I felt sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold. "Sir, if this is some kind of— Do I look dead to you, Mr. Morrison?" I looked at him, really looked. His skin had a waxy quality, like old fruit preserved in sugar. His eyes didn't blink often enough. When he breathed, his chest moved, but the movement seemed performative, like someone remembering to do it rather than needing to. "I need to sit down," I said. "Please." Ezekiel gestured to an empty chair. "We have many chairs. We've collected them over the years. Every decade or so, someone needs them." I didn't sit. What happened to Margaret Pritchard? Mrs. Pritchard completed her assigned task. She counted every member of this household, recorded our information accurately, and performed her civic duty admirably. He rocked gently in his chair. "She asked the same questions you're asking now. We gave her the same answers we're giving you." She had a breakdown. She stopped talking. "Yes, that's usually what happens. The knowing becomes too much." Ezekiel looked at the others, and several of them nodded. It's one thing to suspect the world contains impossible things. It's another to count them, to write their names in an official ledger, to make them real in the eyes of the government. A woman spoke up from the corner. She might have been 40 or 400. We told her she didn't have to complete the form, told her she could leave, but she insisted, said it was her job. "Margaret is very dedicated," I said, using present tense like a talisman. "She is," Ezekiel agreed. "She counted every one of us, asked all the standard questions, birth dates, education levels, occupations. We answered honestly. We always do. Lying seems pointless when you've been dead for 78 years. There it was, said plainly, casually, like discussing the weather. "This is impossible," I said, "and yet you're standing in our home, looking at us, listening to us speak." Ezekiel leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, do you know what a census is really for? At its heart, to count the population, to allocate resources and representation, to acknowledge existence," he corrected, "to say, you are here, you are real, you matter enough to be counted. That's a powerful thing. That's why we've participated in every census since 1880. That's why we always answer the door." My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my pockets. "If you've been dead since 1897, "We didn't die everywhere," a younger woman interrupted. Her name would have been Rebecca if Margaret's notes were accurate, just in the places that count. Our hearts stopped. Our lungs stopped. We stopped in every way that doctors could measure, but we didn't stop here. "My daughter is correct," Ezekiel said. "We exist in the liminal spaces of your world, Mr. Morrison, in the gaps between documented and undocumented. The Census Bureau is the only part of your government that remembers to look in those gaps." I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt. "What do you want?" "What we've always wanted, to be counted, to exist in your records, even if we can't exist anywhere else." He stood up slowly, joints creaking. "We didn't ask for this. The influenza took us too quickly, too viciously. We died before we were ready, before we'd said our goodbyes, before we'd finished living, and somehow, through will or curse or cosmic accident, we didn't let go, we stayed. Stayed where? Here, always here. We can't leave this house, can't go beyond the tree line. We're bound to this place, to each other, to the day we died. But every 10 years, someone comes from the government to remind us we still exist in some small way, to write our names down, to acknowledge us. A child spoke from near the fireplace. He looked about 7, but his voice carried decades of weariness. It's the only time we feel real, when someone writes us down. I thought about Margaret sitting at this same table, dutifully recording information she knew couldn't be true, forcing herself to complete the task even as reality unraveled around her. And I understood, suddenly and completely, why she'd broken. Because they were telling the truth. I couldn't explain how I knew. Maybe it was the way they moved, slightly out of sync with the world, like film played at the wrong speed. Maybe it was the smell, that preserved flower wrongness. Maybe it was something deeper, some primal part of my brain recognizing that these were no longer people in any meaningful sense. I need to leave, I said. Of course. Ezekiel sat back down. You're always free to leave, Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Pritchard was free to leave, but she stayed until she'd completed her work. Will you? I looked at the faces watching me, 23 dead people who'd been dying for 78 years, who needed the government to remember them, who participated in a census because it was the only thread connecting them to the living world. What happens if I don't complete the count? We remain uncounted, and in 10 years, someone else will come. Someone else will have to decide whether to document the impossible or flee from it. He paused. Someone else will break the way Mrs. Pritchard broke. That's why you're telling me all this. You don't want me to break. We don't enjoy it, the woman named Rebecca said softly. When people break, when they can't process what we are, we just need to be counted. That's all we've ever needed. I stood there for a long time, weighing my options. I could run, get in my car, drive back to civilization, report that the house was abandoned or refuse to enumerate it, mark it as completed without actually doing the work. But then I thought about Margaret, sitting in that hospital chair whispering, I counted them over and over. She'd done her job even as it destroyed her. She'd been that dedicated. Could I do less? If I count you, I said slowly, will you answer my questions honestly? All of them? We always do, Ezekiel said. I pulled out my clipboard and forms. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to click my pen. Let's start with you, Mr. Cutter. Full legal name? What followed was the strangest hour of my life. I went through the entire household systematically, just as Margaret had. Asked every standard question. Date of birth, place of birth, educational attainment, occupation. They answered everything. Ezekiel had been a lumber mill owner. Sarah had been a schoolteacher before she married. Thomas had died at age 12, but would have been 71. Rebecca worked as what she called a memory keeper, which I wrote down as household management because there was no census category for whatever she actually meant. Some of them had been born in the 1800s, some in the early 1900s. All of them had died in or near this house, always from circumstances that trapped them here. Disease, accidents. One woman had frozen to death in a winter storm after getting turned around in the woods. We can't leave, she explained when I asked how she'd joined the household. Once we died here, we stayed here. The house collected us. As I worked, I noticed details I'd missed initially. The furniture was a mishmash of styles spanning decades. A Victorian sofa next to a 1920s radio next to a 1960s television that probably had never worked. Objects brought in by the dying, I realized, last possessions. Do you need anything? I asked at one point, then felt stupid. I mean, is there anything that would help? Being counted helps, Ezekiel said simply. Being remembered helps. For 10 years, we'll exist in a government database somewhere. Our names will be real. That's all we can ask for. When I finished the last form, my hand was cramped and my head pounded. I documented 23 people who shouldn't exist, recording information I knew would never make it into the official census count. What happens to this data? I asked. You'll file it. Your supervisors will see it. They'll make quiet notes in their records, and then it will be buried under administrative protocols and forgotten by everyone except us. Ezekiel stood. That's how it always goes. The Bureau has been counting us since 1880. They've developed methods. The Bureau knows. The Bureau suspects. Individual offices have documented us. Those documents are filed away. Anyone who looks too closely gets reassigned. The system protects itself from the impossible by categorizing it as clerical error. I thought about the conflicting 1970 census data. The previous enumerator who'd marked this area as inaccessible. The institutional knowledge passed down about certain addresses in certain regions. How many places like this are there? I asked. We don't know. We only know this house, this hollow, this mountain. But America is large and old and full of gaps. How many of those gaps might hold something like us? He smiled sadly. Maybe that's why you count, to find all the spaces where reality wears thin. I stood up, legs unsteady. I need to go. Of course. Thank you for completing your work, Mr. Morrison. We're grateful. As I walked to the door, the child spoke again. Will you be okay? Mrs. Pritchard wasn't okay. I stopped, looked back at him, at all of them. I don't know. The knowing is hard, he said. Knowing the world is stranger than you thought. Knowing that death doesn't always mean ending. Knowing that you're standing in a room full of impossible things and they're all real. Yeah, I said. That's the hard part. I walked out of that house and down the driveway. Didn't run, didn't look back, just walked. Got in my car, drove down Cutter's Gap Road at exactly the speed limit, following every traffic law, forcing myself to be normal and procedural and bureaucratic. I stopped at the ranger station, used their phone to call a tow truck for Margaret's car, filed a brief report that the enumeration had been completed, kept my voice level and professional. Then I drove the 40 miles back to the district office and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. I went inside, filed the forms, Margaret's and mine, attached a note, household enumerated successfully, no issues. Remote location, recommend only experienced enumerators for future counts. My supervisor looked at the forms, looked at me, and asked one question. Did you see them? Yes. Are you going to be okay? I don't know. He nodded slowly. Take the rest of the week off. When you come back, this file will be archived. We don't talk about it. We don't think about it. We file it under completed and move on. That's how we handle gaps. Is that how the Bureau always handles it? The Bureau handles it the way any organization handles impossible things. We document them, we file them, and we let institutional memory bury them. Truth becomes rumor, becomes legend, becomes forgotten. By 1985, this will just be a note in a database. By 1995, even that will be migrated to a format that loses context. By 2025, it'll be nothing but a statistical anomaly that no one questions. He was right, of course. That's exactly what happened. I never saw Margaret again. She was moved to a private facility, then eventually released to family care. I heard she lived another 12 years, mostly silent, occasionally whispering about counting things no one else could see. I finished out the 1975 census season, then requested a transfer. Spent the rest of my career doing administrative work, far from any field work. Never went back to Appalachia, never drove past anywhere that might have gaps where impossible things lived. But I think about it, especially now, coming up on 50 years later. I think about that house on Cutter's Gap Road, about 23 dead people who need to be counted, about the census taker who'll climb that driveway in 1985, 1995, 2005, 2015, 2025. I wonder what they found. I wonder if the house is still standing. I wonder if Ezekiel is still rocking in his chair, waiting for someone from the government to acknowledge his family exists. And I wonder about all the other gaps. See, here's what I learned from that experience, what I've spent 50 years processing. We like to think reality is solid, that the world is exactly what we can measure and document and file away. But reality has thin spots, places where the rules break down. where the dead don't leave and time doesn't move correctly and impossible things persist simply because no one told them they shouldn't. The Census Bureau's job is to count everyone, no exceptions. That means looking into places others ignore. That means documenting the margins and gaps and forgotten spaces. And sometimes, in those gaps, you find things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. That's why Margaret quit after one house. Not because she was weak or unprofessional or prone to mental breaks, but because she encountered an impossible truth and forced herself to document it anyway. She counted the uncountable, recorded the unrecordable, and acknowledged what everyone else chose to ignore. And it broke her. I lasted longer because Ezekiel warned me, because he wanted me to understand rather than shatter. But it still changed me. I spent the rest of my career avoiding fieldwork because I knew if I looked too carefully at the margins, I'd find more gaps, more impossible things, more families who died but didn't leave. There's an educational element here, something I've thought about a lot. We train census takers extensively: how to approach reluctant respondents, how to handle language barriers, how to ensure accurate counts. But we never train them for this, for the moments when reality doesn't cooperate, for the houses that shouldn't exist containing people who shouldn't be alive. Maybe we should. Maybe instead of burying these reports and transferring away anyone who sees too much, we should acknowledge what Margaret and I learned. The world is stranger than our forms can capture. The gaps are real, and the people who fall through them deserve to be counted too. But that would require admitting the Census Bureau has been documenting ghosts, or whatever the cutters are, for over a century. That would require acknowledging our nice, rational, documented world has cracks in it. That would require looking directly at the impossible instead of filing it away. We're not ready for that. Maybe we never will be. I tried to find out what happened in subsequent census years, called in favors, made quiet inquiries. The data is fragmented, but there are patterns. Every 10 years, an enumerator gets assigned to that section of Cutter's Gap Road. Every 10 years, something unusual appears in the administrative notes. Completed with complications. Remote location, difficult enumeration. Recommend experienced staff only. In 1985, the enumerator completed the assignment, but requested immediate transfer to a different region. In 1995, the enumerator called in sick for 3 weeks after visiting that address. In 2005, the area was marked as wilderness uninhabited, despite clear evidence of the previous counts. In 2015, they sent a 2-person team. Both completed the enumeration. Neither gave interviews about what they found. The pattern holds, the house remains, the family persists, and every 10 years, someone new learns that reality has thin spots. I'm telling this story now because I'm 87 years old and running out of time to tell it. Because Margaret deserves to have people understand why she broke. Because those enumerators in 1985 and 1995 and 2005 and 2015 deserve to know they weren't alone in what they experienced. And because I want whoever gets assigned to that house in 2025 to be prepared. If you're reading this, if you're that person, here's what I need you to understand. You will be afraid. That's normal. They're dead and somehow still present, and your rational mind will rebel against that reality. Let it rebel, feel the fear, but don't let it stop you from doing your job. You will want to run. Don't, or if you do, don't do it until after you've completed the count. They're not malicious. They won't hurt you. They just need to be acknowledged. You will question your sanity. You'll wonder if you're hallucinating or having a mental break. You're not. They're real in the way that matters for census purposes. They're there. They can be counted. They have names and histories. Document everything. Answer their questions honestly when they ask about the world outside. They're starved for connection to the living world. Give them that small gift. And when you're done, when you've filled out all the forms and walked back down that driveway, take care of yourself. Talk to someone if you need to. Take time off if you need to. Don't do what Margaret did and try to push through like nothing happened. Because something did happen. You counted people who can't be counted. You documented the impossible. You looked into one of reality's gaps and acknowledged what you found there. That's hard. That's the hardest thing a census taker can do. But it's also important. Because those 23 people in that house on Cutter's Gap Road are still people in the ways that matter. They remember being alive. They remember loving and losing and living. They deserve to be counted, not in spite of being dead, but because being counted is the last thread connecting them to the world they left behind. Margaret understood that. That's why she completed the form even as it destroyed her. She knew documentation matters, acknowledgement matters, being counted matters. I understood it too, which is why I finished what she started. And whoever you are, reading this in 2025 or 2035 or 2045, you'll understand it when you climb those porch steps and meet Ezekiel Cutter's patient smile. You'll understand why the census matters more than we think. Why counting everyone, even the impossible ones, is sacred work. Why we look into the gaps. You'll understand why Margaret quit after just one house, and you'll have to decide if you're strong enough to do what she did anyway. Count them, document them, acknowledge them, make them real for another 10 years. That's the job. That's always been the job. We just don't talk about all the aspects of it. The 2020 census came and went, and I don't know what happened. I'm too old now, too far removed from the Bureau, but I imagine someone climbed that driveway. Someone knocked on that door. Someone sat at that kitchen table and counted 23 impossible people. I hope they were okay afterward. I hope they understood what they were doing and why it mattered. I hope they didn't break the way Margaret broke. But if they did, if the knowing was too much, if they couldn't reconcile what they saw with what they thought was real, I hope someone was there to help them. I hope someone told them they weren't crazy, weren't alone, weren't the first to stare into that gap and feel reality shift beneath their feet. That's why I'm telling this story. Not to frighten anyone away from census work, not to suggest the world is more terrifying than we know, though it is, but to create a record that acknowledges what happened to Margaret Pritchard in 1975, what happened to me when I followed her up that mountain, and what's been happening every 10 years since. There are gaps in reality. They exist in remote Appalachian hollows and probably countless other places we haven't documented yet. They contain impossible things that nonetheless must be counted. And the people who do that counting, who look directly at the impossible and document it anyway, deserve to be acknowledged too. Margaret Pritchard quit after one house because that house changed everything she thought she knew about the world. Because it showed her that death wasn't always an ending, that reality had thin spots, that impossible things could be real. She quit because she was human, and humans break when the foundations crack. But before she quit, she did her job. She counted every single member of that household. She recorded their information meticulously. She made them real in the government's eyes for another 10 years. That's heroism in its way. Not the flashy kind, the quiet kind, the kind that says, I will document the truth even if it destroys me. I will count everyone, even the dead. I will look into the gap and acknowledge what I find there. We should all be so brave. I think about Margaret sometimes, in her last years, sitting quietly with the weight of what she'd seen. I wonder if she found peace with it. I wonder if she understood how important her work was, how meaningful it was to those 23 people who needed to be counted. I hope she did. I hope when she whispered, I counted them. I counted all of them. There was satisfaction in those words along with the trauma. I hope she knew she'd done the right thing, the necessary thing, the brave thing. Because she did. And 50 years later, I'm still trying to do justice to her courage by telling this story. The Census Bureau will never officially acknowledge what happened on Cutter's Gap Road. The administrative notes will remain vague. The files will be buried. The pattern of broken enumerators and difficult assignments will continue, decade after decade, without explanation. That's how institutions handle impossible truths. They document them quietly, file them away, and let them fade into statistical noise. But I remember, and now you remember too. The 1975 Appalachian Census taker quit after just one house because that house contained 23 dead people who needed to be counted. Because reality has thin spots where the impossible persists. Because some jobs break the people who do them, even when those people do everything right. That's the truth. That's what happened. And every 10 years, it happens again. Someone climbs that driveway. Someone meets the Cutter family. Someone has to decide whether to document the impossible or flee from it. I hope they choose to document it. I hope they're okay afterward. I hope they understand why it matters, and I hope someday we can talk openly about the gaps in our world instead of filing them away and pretending they don't exist. Because they do exist. I've seen one, Margaret Pritchard saw one, and someone, right now, is probably climbing a driveway toward another one, clipboard in hand, ready to count people who shouldn't exist but do anyway. That's the real story behind why a census taker quit after one house. It's not the story the Bureau once told, but it's the story that needs telling. And now it's told.